absolute, undeniable turbulence of modern parenting. If you've ever stood there watching a toddler joyfully plunge their bare hands into a fresh bowl of yogurt, or if you've tried to have a normal conversation with a teenager who is literally super glued to their social media feed, well, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The digital age hasn't just upgraded our tech, it's added all these entirely new, incredibly complex layers of stress to raising human beings. It can honestly feel like absolute chaos.
But here's the good news. You aren't flying blind. In today's Explainer, we're going to use Dr. Jacqueline Nacey's evidence-based techno-sapiens philosophy to help you safely pilot your family right through these chaotic digital skies. Really, think of this as your essential flight manual. We're going to cut through the noise, we're going to drop that heavy mom and dad guilt, and we'll look at what the actual research says about raising kids today. We've got a very clear flight plan for this Explainer. We'll be hitting the techno-sapiens philosophy, authoritative parenting, navigating screens, the science of consequences, your own well-being, and trusting your gut. Let's get cleared for takeoff.
Part 1. The Techno-Sapiens Philosophy. Let's move beyond judgment and lay down our foundation.
So the core of Dr. Nessie's approach is this brilliant three-legged stool concept. You see, we constantly fall into this trap of thinking less screen time is always better, right? But that just breeds immense guilt when we inevitably fall short. Instead, you need to balance three specific things to find a realistic equilibrium for your family. Leg 1 is the hard research evidence, what the data actually tells us. Leg 2 is your clinical expertise as a parent, because yes, you are the absolute expert on your own family. And Leg 3 is your child's unique characteristics. A highly sensitive kid might need totally different digital boundaries than a highly outgoing one. It's all about balance, not perfection. And honestly, that should be a massive relief.
Moving right along to Part 2, the power of authoritative parenting, which is basically your ultimate co-pilot strategy.
Decades of child psychology research really just boil down to two simple, powerful words: warmth and structure. This is what we call authoritative parenting. Imagine you're flying a plane and you suddenly hit massive turbulence. You don't want a pilot who totally panics right along with you, but you also don't want some emotionless robot who completely ignores your fear. You want a pilot who gets on the intercom, calmly validates that the bumps are scary, that's the warmth, but then firmly instructs everyone to keep their seatbelts securely fastened, that's the structure. As the pilot of your household, you provide that unconditional support through listening and play, while simultaneously setting those clear, predictable boundaries to keep everyone safe.
Which brings us to Section 3, Navigating Screens and Media. This is the age-specific airspace, where parents definitely feel the most turbulence.
The absolute crucial point here is that not all screen time is created equal, and age matters entirely. For kids under 3, the research is crystal clear. They learn best from human servant-return interactions. Basically, a baby babbles, you smile and talk back. A screen just cannot replicate that, so the strategy is to lean heavily on real human contact and avoid screens. But for preschoolers, ages 2 to 5, the whole landscape shifts. They actually benefit from high-quality, structured educational content. So putting on Sesame Street or Daniel Tiger while you frantically try to cook dinner, that isn't a parenting failure at all. It's a perfectly acceptable, research-backed use of media.
Now let's talk about the older kids. When it comes to teens, the data is sobering, but it's nuanced. Research shows there's about a 75% probability that social media is actively contributing to the current teen mental health crisis. It is a massive factor, no doubt. But we have to look at that remaining 25% slice of the puzzle. While social media is a huge piece, it is rarely the sole isolated cause of their distress.
We really have to zoom out and look at the broader picture here. Our teens are flying through incredibly heavy societal turbulence right now. They're coming of age in a world dealing with school shootings, the looming persistent anxieties of climate change, and the devastating impacts of the opioid epidemic. It's this massive, complex web of stressors. So blaming everything entirely on TikTok or Instagram, that completely ignores the very real, very heavy world they are navigating every single day.
And speaking of screens, what about smartphones in the classroom? Well, the research highlights that the primary risk here actually isn't some deep psychological damage happening during math class, it's just pure, unadulterated distraction. The data shows that limiting smartphone access in schools directly combats this. When schools take the phones away during class, we see a massive, direct boost in test scores, especially for students who are already struggling academically. Plus, we see this incredible resurgence of actual, noisy, face-to-face connection in the hallways, which is exactly what we want.
Let's dive into Section 4, the science of consequences. How exactly do we course correct when behaviors veer off the flight path?
Navigating discipline actually requires practical tools rooted in operant conditioning. which is just the basic science that behavior is shaped by its consequences. Positive reinforcement works wonders, right? Praise the behavior you want to see. But what happens when you try to stop a bad behavior? Let's say your child yells for attention, and you decide you're going to stop rewarding that yelling by just ignoring it. You are inevitably going to encounter a phenomenon called the extinction burst. This is when the unwanted behavior temporarily gets significantly worse, louder, and more intense before it finally gets better. The kid is basically thinking, hey, my yelling usually works, the volume must be broken. I better yell twice as loud. It is totally maddening, but it's completely normal. Consistency is literally your only way through the burst. You cannot cave.
We actually see this most famously in those brutal bedtime battles. If your child refuses to fall asleep alone, you can safely apply what's called graduated extinction. Step 1, establish a consistent, wildly boring bedtime routine. Step 2, leave them to fall asleep independently. Step 3, check in, but at increasing intervals, 2 minutes, then 5, then 10. And the research is highly reassuring on this. It effectively builds your child's independence, and importantly, it does not cause any long-term psychological harm.
Section 5. Parental well-being and gratitude. Let's manage the cockpit, because you can't fly this plane safely if you're falling apart at the controls.
I want you to take a deep breath and listen to this number. Between 70 to 100% of new moms experience intrusive thoughts. Things like, what if I drop the baby? Or what if we crash the car? This is the classic white bear problem. If I tell you right now, do not think about a white bear, what instantly pops into your head? A white bear. The harder you fight the thought, the stronger it gets. These thoughts are incredibly common, almost universal. Psychology tells us the absolute best way to handle them is to simply acknowledge the thought. Just say to yourself, wow, that was a weird, scary thought, and then do absolutely nothing. Don't fight it, just let it pass.
Now, when you hit a very real parenting crisis, the dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT framework, offers this remarkably clear, no-nonsense set of options. In any crisis, you actually only have 4 choices. 1, you can solve the problem. If you can't solve it, option 2 is to change how you feel about it. Option 3, you can radically accept the turbulence for what it is. Or there's the starkly honest 4th option. You can simply choose to stay miserable. It sounds harsh, I know, but it's incredibly empowering to realize you ultimately have control over which path you take.
Beyond just managing crises, a huge chunk of your family's baseline well-being comes from gratitude. But here's the catch. You cannot forcefully demand that your kids be grateful. Yelling, "Be grateful for your dinner," rarely works out well, but you can actively foster it. You do this through niche selection, which means putting them in environments like volunteer work where gratitude naturally bubbles up. You do it through conversations, intentionally spotting and validating acts of kindness out loud. And above all, you do it through modeling. You've got to demonstrate grateful behavior yourself, out loud, where they can actually see and hear it.
Finally, we've reached Section 6, trusting your parenting gut for a smooth landing.
As we bring this flight in for a final landing, I really want you to internalize this idea. Parenting is fundamentally about quality over quantity. It is not about perfection. Look, perfection doesn't exist in the digital age or any age for that matter. If you are providing the basics, food to eat, a safe place to sleep, and you are striving for that crucial balance of warmth and structure we talked about earlier, then you need to let go of the guilt. Trust your gut. You are doing a genuinely great job as the pilot of your family.
You now have the evidence-based manual. You understand the 3-legged stool, the power of warmth and structure, and the actual reality behind the screen time statistics. So as we wrap up this explainer, I leave you with this final thought to ponder. Armed with this knowledge, how will you step back into the cockpit and adjust your family's digital flight plan today? Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.